Greetings, dear friends. We are sincerely glad to welcome you again, and today we will have a conversation with the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Hello.
Igor Mikhailovich, in the previous video, we discussed simulation, whether our world is a simulation, and we referred to a lot of various facts which basically confirmed this simulation model. However, we did find some arguments, substantial arguments, which actually say that we do not live in a simulation, but rather in a combined world, because it is precisely us as humans who do not fit into this simulation hypothesis. Since we have personality that completely breaks this well-composed simulation model. Yet, if a human is actually not aware of himself as personality, if he lives as primary or secondary consciousness, in this case, a simulation works in him 100%. At the end of the previous video, you touched upon a very important subject and said that it would be possible to talk about egregores during one of our meetings, and that it's a very interesting topic. Certainly, we would like not to drag it out and would prefer to discuss the topic of egregores today. What an egregore is, what its essence actually is, and what it's all about, because many people even doubt whether an egregore really exists.
Do you know what the most interesting thing is? That no one knows what an egregore looks like and what it is.
That's right.
We can only observe its manifestations. And even our observations, which definitely indicate the presence of an egregore, say almost nothing about what it is, what kind of a phenomenon it is.
Therefore, many people think, is it scientific at all or is it unscientific?
Nobody knows.
Is there any experimental basis on this subject?
There is a lot. Indeed, a lot of experiments have been conducted and a lot of observations have been made. It's a fact that egregores exist, but no one knows what it is. As of today, an egregore is really a very mysterious phenomenon, but the fact that it exists is 100% true. Yeah. What is it like? You see? Is it some kind of a field structure, some kind of an energy structure? What unites people? And not only people, everything living has an egregore. Moreover, starting from the smallest organisms and up to humans, these are the facts which are scientifically established, so to say. Okay, let's begin with simple things. What is an egregore? It is something that unites us based on something, isn't it? If we take animals, their egregore is very simple: survival of species, seizure of other territories, food supply, and many other things. In other words, it is that which prevents them, let's say, from dying and contributes to their survival.
As a species, exactly.
Yes, as a species, or from extinction. Although, a lot of various species disappear every day, right? But nevertheless, this egregore is something like a supramind, let's say, or a supermind that watches them, or a group mind. There is no other way to put it. And here again, the one that watches them. Well, isn't there such a fact? Here's a simple example, friends. Due to the climate events and everything else, we have to carry out a lot of research. Moreover, we observe the behavior of, those very bacteria, and up to elephants, humans, and other planets. So we compare. We look at their behavior, observe, and study anyway. Whether we want it or not, we come across various footage, right? Including observations, for example, of wolves, or, what is even more interesting, a lion pride, how it hunts.
Yes.
It is filmed by video surveillance drones at the moment of hunting. When lions themselves are immersed in the grass, and the grass is much higher than them, that is, they do not see each other. They approach their hunting ground, where some goats are walking around, and they would approach from different sides. Clearly, this is nature. Living species have been undergoing evolution for millions of years. Plus, they could synchronize and gain some practice, some experience. All this can be explained. But when they approach and chase an animal so as to drive it away from the pack, they act in absolute sync. At the same time, they do not utter a single sound and do not see each other. Yes, roles are assigned, so to say. Yes, everyone has their own role planned, as it has become sort of evolutionarily established in their pride.
Such an accumulated experience.
Right, experience and practice, but the situation changes. And it is interesting, when the pack starts running away, the situation changes in an uncertain way. But lions act very synchronously and properly. Hence, there is an impression Let's just say, I discussed this with many people who were involved in studying the habits of lions and the like. So there is an interesting observation, and even those people became interested in the fact that lions act as if someone controls them. That is, when an animal is in the thickets, yes, it can use its sense of smell and hearing to orient itself where its prey is. Or it can use its sense of smell to orient itself where its congeners are. And it can use its hearing there, right? But very synchronously, very accurately. That is, those are tactically correct actions, you see? They isolate an animal and just kill it. But then again, those very animals that they eat also evolve and they also develop similar tactics, how to evade attacks and defend themselves.
How to evade those attacks, right?
Yes, who controls the pack? A simple question. A threat appears, and the pack starts moving away simultaneously. Moreover, it runs away in zigzags, as they are supposed to. Well, again, there is evolution and diverse accumulated experience. Yet, how does the pack move simultaneously? Let's consider humans. In this case, again, we have touched upon the movement of animals. Humans, each person is separate. Yes, we create temporary egregores of some kind, but humanity doesn't have a common egregore. We are separate. I hope we'll get to that. Some event happens, God forbid, something terrible happens, and a crowd of people tries to go down, for example, into the subway, or to go through a narrow gate. Trying to avoid or run away from something. What happens? A crowd crush.
A crowd crush.
We just bump into each other. We trample each other to death at that, and sometimes a lot of people die. But excuse me, we are much more advanced intellectually than those very goats that run away from lions, or those very fish that escape from a predator. Why do they act in perfect synchrony? Some people say, they have receptors and so forth. I understand. Fish have sensors, a lateral line, they sense each other and so on. Why do they not collide? Let's take locusts. Locusts fly chaotically in huge numbers, and not a single one collides with another. Yet they fly wing by wing, that is, in absolute crowdedness, without hitting each other. How is that possible? Well, it's the locust effect. It has been studied. Locusts have sort of learned to work together. However, they perform abrupt turns, rises, falls, and it's all like a single mechanism.
Yes, exactly.
They act like a single animal. Let's look at birds. When they gather in flocks, they fly very closely and even manage to perform some maneuvers, right? How do they do that? Why do humans, the highest intelligent beings, trample each other where they could somehow synchronize and just pass?
Why does it happen so, Igor Mikhailovich? Why?
The answer lies precisely in the egregore. Why? We, human beings, let's say, not only have two forms of an egregore, we are dual. We have both an angel and a demon. Sorry, I'll use this language to simplify things and make it clearer. We can either create a common egregore on the spiritual basis, or we can create it on the animal basis, just like animals do. But even if we create this egregore on the animal basis, we don't create a common egregore. Meaning, we don't have one united egregore. We are not a civilization. We're a fragmented community that divides within itself. Yet what is division? It is division of the egregore, division of everything. For example, soccer. We all gather into a single whole. We can see how fans divide into two sectors, one sector, for instance, or
one roots for one team, the other for
into several sectors, right? Some fans on that side root for one team, while fans on this side root for the other team, right? So they are all synchronized and everyone feels the support. They do the wave and everyone shouts in time. They worry, emote, and so forth. There's a single egregore. However, when this crowd starts to come out, God forbid, there happens what? They trample one another. Why?
They kind of disconnect from this egregore, right?
Our egregores are temporary, the ones we form.
They are unstable.
Absolutely. We cannot create a stable egregore from the position of an animal because of our selfishness, because of our self-concentration, let's say, in self-obsession. Why? We have a dual consciousness. That's it. Animals do not have a dual consciousness. They have supra-consciousness and primary consciousness. Well, with a certain set of reflexes, let's say.
That is, they focus on the goal more firmly.
Absolutely. They are controlled from the outside. Look how it happens, for example, when a herd of horses is running. It's beautiful, isn't it? Nobody pushes or hits anybody. If some horse falls, it is almost never trampled. Why? They are wild animals. But if a person falls, people trample on him. Just look, these are simple things. Let's take protozoa. Well, what could be simpler than fungi?
Yes.
For example, right? A fungus has a memory, that's for sure. In other words, we take mycelium. We also did this in the past. We studied it, and there were quite interesting observations. Again, are fungi intelligent or not intelligent? Well, the question is quite acute. How can something obscure, let's say, it's not moss, it's not a tree, but at the same time, it is closer to an animal than to a plant? How can this creature have a mind? In no way, right? We place a fungus into a labyrinth, put something tasty in the center of the labyrinth, and the fungus finds it after a while. The second time, it goes straight through without errors. We complicate the labyrinth, make it more complex. Again, we put something tasty in the middle, in the center. The fungus deviates a little, but it still comes and finds it. We take one piece of mycelium and form a new mycelium. And out of this mycelium, out of one mycelium that is formed, we let a fungus go through the same labyrinths again. It goes through them immediately.
In other words, there is a complete exchange of this skill.
Absolutely right. So what is a fungus? I would say a fungus is not just a single organism, it's a community. A large number of small organisms, that is, more in line with what a fungus is. So a mycelium has a kind of its own mind, which is able to avoid dangers or something. Yes, we can say it feels somehow something else. Okay. Well, those are long experiments, okay? That's not the subject for today. One day I will tell you about a very funny, interesting, and I would even say almost mystical behavior of fungi, which absolutely doesn't fit into the animal world. Let's consider something else. Let's consider bacteria. There are experiments that have been conducted many times, and they work. Let's say there is an experiment, a form of some pathogens is taken. Let's take a microorganism, germs. It doesn't matter. They are being killed by antibiotics. Well, it's clear. There is a bacterium. An antibiotic is directed against it. The antibiotic suppresses its life. We divide a group of bacteria into 3 parts. For example, there are 3 test tubes. It doesn't matter. 3 glasses. The first glass will be used in the experiment as the main one. What do experts do? They seal and isolate this glass. It is absolutely inaccessible to any odors or anything else. Let's just say, it's impossible to transfer information to it from other glasses in any biological way. Those glasses are also isolated. The second part of bacteria is simply killed with an antibiotic, with a certain dose, and it dies. As for the third part, they begin to gradually adapt it to the antibiotic in order to create resistance in bacteria. That is, resistance to this antibiotic. Eventually, these microorganisms not only become resistant, but also stronger. They start feeding on this antibiotic. It is clear, here, we in doses gradually give bacteria an opportunity to get used to it, right? To develop protection from the antibiotic and everything else. The first part wasn't involved, was it? So we take the first part, the first glass, and we double the dose of the antibiotic that killed the second part. Let's say, our test tube or whatever we keep them in. So we give the bacteria a double dose of the antibiotic, and they behave like the ones from the third test tube. A question arises. They were not in contact. Was it due to a radio wave? What kind of energy do we know?
Yes, which way is it transmitted?
Yes, after all, what do we know? How is information transmitted? Well, at some energy level. What energy levels do we know that can be transmitted? For example, the magnetic field, some other types of radiation, an electromagnetic wave, but we still come to electromagnetism and nothing more.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, we can put it, for example, in a Faraday cage, isolate it, and that's it. It's impossible to transmit a signal in any way. We conduct an experiment, but the result is the same.
It is not shielded.
Absolutely, and no matter what we do, it is not shielded. What is also interesting, again, it's not quite included in this experiment, but it confirms the presence of a unified field of some kind in this community of microorganisms. Let's take probiotics. Nowadays, this trendy expression appeared not so long ago. Let's just say it's a set of certain living organisms that are useful for the body, so to speak. What do? We take these organisms and seal them in an ampule. Everything is thoroughly disinfected, the surface is washed, everything is perfect. That is, the probiotic is in our ampule. We immerse the ampule in a vessel with water, the clearest water without any impurities, without anything, and we leave it for several days. We simply keep it all in the dark for several days. Then we carefully take out the ampule with the probiotic and examine this clearest water under a microscope. There is nothing, not a single microorganism. The water may even be distilled. By the way, distilled water is even better. Everything is fine, and everything is normal. A paradox. The water acts like that probiotic.
The composition remains, but the properties change.
How could the water receive information through the glass, being isolated from the probiotic itself? What kind of information is that? Moreover, we cannot find it or measure it with anything, but its effect is absolutely similar. We take the same water from the same canister, for example, from which it was poured into that ampule during the experiment, and it doesn't work. How is this transmitted? How can we explain it? I mean, this merely indicates that there are really a lot of things we don't know. And regarding egregores, we don't know much all the more. Do they exist? Of course they do. Let's just remind our friends of the experiment that we carried out in the pyramid, okay? The experiment on the transmission of an image, some kind of a symbol. There were also numbers there. Well, we conducted several experiments. Thousands of people participated across all the continents. How can we explain that the operator herself who actually performed this experiment, while all of us were participants and observers of the experiment, she herself didn't know until the last moment, until the experiment began. She didn't know what she would work with.
That's right.
But people had already given answers 2 or even 3 days in advance, and the answers were correct. After all, they didn't even know what symbols we would work with. They sent their answers, and that's a confirmed fact. It's not an isolated case, there were a lot of them. And the overall result when the symbol was transmitted was that almost 80% of people guessed it correctly. This actually destroys everything. Let's say all theories, fortuities, and so on, because it's impossible to explain it in any way except via a single egregore, right? A unified field structure that gets connected. I understand that we were a group of people. We were connected by this single egregore. We entered into that experiment. We were attuned. We were all waiting for it. We knew when, on what day, and at what time it would be held. At that moment, we were supposed to just look a little bit into our minds at what predominated. What symbol appeared? Just that. Easily and simply. Yes, some people received it later, but they gave the right answers. But how could people know the answer in advance? Hence what? Our notorious time and space is violated, isn't it? Do we break this very continuum?
It turns out we do.
But this formation which is being formed, is it a single egregore? It is single.
Synchronized on the same goal, right?
Well, let's say I am more than sure that a signal was coming from our operator, from the pyramid, and taking into account that a lot of people were involved on all the continents. I think others also received it, but they didn't pay attention. They didn't know what it was when this sign flashed in their eyes there. Or for instance, a picture formed in their head. Yes.
They simply disregarded it, yes.
Or when a person paid attention to some number and the like. But isn't that interesting? It is interesting. That is why when we started having such interesting results, we were politely recommended to engage in something else. There is only one conclusion. When elections take place, what do people create? A single egregore. There are candidates, there are numbers, and so on, right? So, some people vote for one party, while others vote for another one. Moreover, we vote, even understanding and knowing in advance that we shouldn't vote for a particular person, but we go, support, and vote for him, in the hope that he will actually fulfill what he promised. Well, this is certainly funny, but it's a fact.
Above logic of some kind,
We
yes.
also create an egregore, you see. So how? In what way can we explain our experiment except with a single egregore? And there are plenty of such examples.
Igor Mikhailovich, what is creation and formation of such an egregore of all people not beneficial for the simulation, let's say?
Because, let's say, we will weaken the system itself. We will get out of this illusion.
How does our human egregore fundamentally differ from the animal egregore, except that it is so difficult for us to keep our attention on one goal
The
together?
difference is in absolute control. In other words, an animal egregore actually has control. Let's take an anthill, and we'll see that everything is in its place. Let's take a beehive. Everything is in its place. Moreover, a forager bee can become a guard bee and vice versa, in the event of death. For example, let's look at ants. They sacrifice. Most of them can sacrifice themselves to preserve their anthill population.
Yes, right.
Without any hesitation, immediately, instantly. They don't reflect, they are robots. This is
There is no value of an individual, right?
absolutely right. Why? Because their life is in the anthill and in its essence, whereas our life is individual for everyone. You see, that is why it is extremely difficult for us to create a common egregore. We have repeatedly touched upon brainstorming. When such an action is performed, after all, in this case, a single egregore is created, focused on a certain goal, right?
Yes, right.
Right. For example, a group of scientists are sitting. They are thinking and trying to solve one task, but there appears someone who doubts, a destabilizer. What did we say? He should be escorted out the door. Why?
He's in dissonance.
Right. Otherwise, he will destroy the entire egregore. He will take people out of that special state, and whatever vril power this whole group possesses, it would be directed elsewhere, randomly, because someone is in dissonance, and they can no longer buy what they want, right? You see how simple everything is?
Very interesting indeed.
Whereas, let's say, one united human egregore actually threatens the system itself. Or speaking in simpler, religious terms, it threatens Satan because humanity can turn towards God. Let's take a simple example. The creative society. What does it give? After all, it is the ultimate consumerism. Indeed.
What everyone dreams of.
Friends, if you look without pridefulness, but truly, each of us is what? A consumer, right? Each of us is an egoist. All of us want, well, whoever wants what, right? Someone wants to achieve something. Well, again, everything comes down to money, fame, and all sorts of interesting acquisitions for oneself, right?
That's right.
The creative society creates the best conditions for a person to acquire for himself everything he wants. Number one, he gets a universal basic income. Number two, he is absolutely protected. He is indeed genuinely protected. There are no wars, no inflation. Well, whatever bad and negative stuff exists in this world is virtually non-existent in the creative society. It is really a perfect world for humanity's existence, right? And for its
In
self-fulfillment.
other words, yes, exactly. In fact, people fight for this in the world for some kind of boons.
Of course, they conquer them and so
Which
forth.
in the creative society are given by peaceful means.
You are absolutely right. Nevertheless, let's say, despite understanding, knowing, and wishing it all, people mostly remain inert in pursuing this, right? For themselves. Why?
Who immobilizes them?
Who immobilizes them? It is precisely Satan who immobilizes them. Why? Because in fact, if people create one united egregore of civilization, then what is ultimately hidden behind all this consumerism? Spiritual enlightenment. Why? Because such concepts as honor and conscience, which are almost lost in our today's society, will begin to prevail. After all, this is true. If among us there prevail lies, double and triple standards, if to this day there are wars, if to this day when people are in trouble, while others start reflecting on whether to help them or not, instead of doing all they can to save as many lives as possible, but they don't do this, then what should we call this world? A world that has gone insane. A world that has divided people into first class, second class, and third class, into good and bad, into friends and foes. In fact, all this is the formation of different egregores, so to say, which are extremely difficult to unite together. But the creative society is able to unite them. However, it will generate, let's say, great resistance to the system itself.
A threat to it.
In a real threat, yes.
There is another question, Igor Mikhailovich. Some people will say, I'm such an independent individual and I do not belong to any egregore. I do not join any egregore. Is it possible for a person?
It's impossible. I mean, such an individual existence, being independent of anyone, is simply unrealistic for a human being. First of all, a person doesn't even have his own will. Yes, friends, it's true. Many people will react to this idea. How come? I have both the power and the will. If I want, I do. But here you should ask yourself a question. Who made you want and who wants instead of you? You see, to commit stupidity, sometimes it's literally stupidity. To risk one's own life, to risk one's own health. Well, is that reasonable? After all, we are intelligent beings. Even animals don't do that, but we do. You see? We start experimenting, or for the sake of a good selfie, we hang on a rock on one hand, being very well aware that we are going to fall and no one will help us, but we do it for the sake of getting at least a little drop of vril from other people, you see, just to attract attention to ourselves.
So, in fact, every time people unite for some purpose, they already fall under the influence of a certain egregore.
Of course.
That is, whether it's about building a house or something else.
It doesn't matter. When we have a goal and we are united for this goal, our actions begin to be reinforced. Why? Because they combine all our forces, do you understand? So in this case, our abilities increase as well. And in fact, if we consider that very construction, if we really want to build something well and quickly, and we are synchronized, then after a while, everything starts to go like clockwork, you see? I mean, in the best way, and with the most correct solutions, we begin to carry out this construction work, right? That is, the same applies to everything. Let's again return to this egoist who says that he is an individual. Consciousness is not his. Consciousness is only a part of the common field. I mean, it's true. There is a single egregore. In religions, it is called Satan. We say that it's the system. Some say it's a unified mind, a universal intelligence, whatever we call it, logos, for instance, whatever you want to call it, there will be one fact. This is the one that thinks for us and makes us do what it wants. It wants. But not you. Do you understand? That's the most stable egregore in this material world.
Another very interesting point which confirms that there is actually an egregore is our friends who are engaged in informing about the Creative Society project.
But in this case, it's another egregore. Here, it is already more spiritual, and there are people who are trying to do something for other people at a loss for themselves.
With care.
Of course, taking care of other people. They unite around one idea, to change the world for the better. This is a completely different egregore. Is it stable? I would say, not really. Why? It can only become stable when the whole of humanity will really be with us, following in this direction. Then it can be really formed as a stable egregore. But in this case, the possibilities are different as well.
It is interesting that when we talk to people in different parts of the world, on different continents, even on the topic of that very creative society, we notice that sometimes there is even a certain algorithm of a conversation, and people use the same phrases, as you described, how in the animal world independent information is distributed throughout the entire egregore. In the same way it is here. Sometimes it happens that the course of a conversation is exactly the same, as if they were simply reading a question and an answer from some piece of paper. How the system gives that and throws it into people.
Everything is stereotypical.
Yes, these algorithms are the same.
Well, we discussed this more than once. Again, we discussed that thoughts come at the same time and so on, like a matrix. Yet, what does the matrix form? It exactly forms this very egregore of the system itself. Again, you have noted correctly that regardless of either nationality or the knowledge of one or another language, there are still stereotypical patterns from the system itself. They are everywhere around, all over the world. Why? Well, there are languages for us, but there are no languages for the system. After all, we perceive those very thoughts in a completely different form, in that form which does not have a certain language, so to say, for expressing it.
Yes, exactly.
It is already us, people, who invent languages.
We decipher it, right?
We decipher, interpret it in our own way, and so on. I mean, what we receive, that information. Meanwhile, we receive it in the same way from everyone. That's the paradox. Let me give you a simple example. Let's just say these experiments do exist. Anyone who wants to can find them. Those were the works by Durov and Bekhterev on mental commands. Well, our scientists talk mostly about animals and very little about people. So in their time, Durov and Bekhterev conducted experiments on foreigners and accordingly on those who understood the language.
Compatriots.
Right, compatriots. They execute mental commands in exactly the same way, not knowing the language. Do you see what the difference is?
Yes, sure.
For instance, even between certain suggestion techniques and hypnosis, language is not needed.
Igor Mikhailovich, if we talk about creating an egregore in which universal human values and care about people are sincerely embedded indeed.
Well, it is the creative
It
society.
is the creative society, but do we have inspiring examples? Maybe someone succeeded and already managed to create this kind
To
of...
build a good egregore.
Yes, at least, well, I don't know.
Yes, there is an example, but as usual, it ended badly in this consumerist format. The Knights Templar, they actually had a very serious motivation, and indeed there was a very powerful impulse, a serious push in the spiritual direction. They were inspired, they really became an order of honor and did a whole lot for people. Those were people who, well, they were not greedy, they were true humans. They were united by a single spiritual egregore, and for a very long time they prospered. A lot of people aspired to join their ranks, so to say, because they were true heroes. They lived for people's benefit and sake. They did everything to improve the lives of people, of those whom they were able to help. If it remained this way, we would have had the creative society a long time ago. However,
what mistakes did they make? It is very important to understand this so as not to repeat their negative experience.
You see, when they became powerful and serious, too much money was flowing through them. The first thing they let happen was that they began to regard this money as their own. In other words, they destroyed the egregore, and everything started collapsing from the head down. Well, fish stinks at the head. As above, so below. Naturally, it came to the point that they started building palaces for themselves larger than royal ones. Eventually, instead of protecting and serving people, they began to protect their wealth and to serve their mammon, their greed, their inner dragon. That's the answer for you, why they collapsed. But they actually started their way with dignity. And the most important thing is that let's just say, the first thing they did was to kill their heart, that very power group inside, the order. Why? Because it was their conscience and honor to be avid and greedy, to strive for power, and at the same time, to have conscience and honor, that's unrealistic. So they exchanged conscience, honor, and humaneness, or to put it simply, they exchanged eternity and heaven for hell and illusions of this world. Therefore, they were destroyed by the same people as them. But before that, more than one generation actually managed to enter heaven, being in a single egregore.
Well, the times we live in are unique, and it is probably high time to make a counter-step and build a creative society. This one united egregore that is founded on universal human values and truly in sincere care about all people. You know, I remember that we once gave an example regarding Tsiolkovsky. When two people unite, when two auras unite, their potential increases sevenfold. When four people unite, their potential increases more than 300 times. But in the times we live in the times when every 12,000 years, there comes this impulse of life.
This is a 24,000-year cycle.
It turns out that this unification, the potential of this unification also increases.
It does increase. And in fact, it is a huge impetus for a civilization to ascend, to improve, to become stronger. It is a huge impetus for life. And in general, it is an impetus even for the sun and for everything that exists in this world, as we've already discussed. However, it's an absolutely fair impetus. If we are incapable of becoming humanity, if we are incapable of gaining life, well, then we are like waste material. It is our choice, it is our life, and the Cerberus is not accidental. After all, the very same impetus gives life and power to the Cerberus as well, and its power is increasing. And unfortunately, we are witnessing that. Will it increase? Of course it will. Is there anything we can do to stop it? Well, I'll put it as follows. Yes, we can stop the Cerberus, but to do that, we must use this power and become a united civilization. Only then can we put it on a tight collar and a short leash. Or there should be a very good reason for, well, let's just say, for someone else to do this instead of us. There's a very small chance of it, and I wouldn't pin my hopes on it. Still, we should become a civilization and do it all ourselves. Can we do that? Of course we can. We have enormous capabilities. The capabilities of a human are enormous. We, as human beings, possess tremendous power, and our hidden power is capable of a lot. We can even move mountains. We can do a lot. We have turned back the rivers. Again, let's say we have advanced science. Can we make one more leap? An evolutionary leap? Of course we can. Both in science and in everything. Eventually we can understand and determine what that very egregore is, what kind of energy is used, what the impulse of life is, what energy is used, and how to use its destructive power for creation. Can we do that? We can do it all, friends, but to do that, we must become a united civilization. Or not become one. It is everyone's choice, and here, each person should, first of all, perceive it all individually, and think about what kind of world he needs and what he wants. But again, here we should face, let's say, the present day with common sense and honesty. Why? Because there are people, unfortunately, who do not see reality, who live in illusion and think everything is fine, it's none of my business. But without them, there will be no civilization. So the challenge of reaching out to the deaf is, let's say, tough. Well, the tougher the challenge is, the more interesting it is. This is not a reason for despair.
As you once said, in the body every cell is important.
Of course, it is.
Yes, exactly.
Let me give you a simple example. We as entire humanity are cells of the same body, but right now, we behave like, imagine that there is a human body where every single cell is actually a human being. And so it begins to go crazy. Some cells declare that they will live on their own as they like. And there begins what? Cancer. Why? Because they do not follow the universal law, the law of life. They want to escape the cycle.
On their own.
Right. To live longer, to eat tastier food and so forth. What happens to the body? Their toxic excretions simply begin to kill the body, and the body simply begins to die. Isn't that so? It is.
Every cell now feels that the body is sick.
100%.
And it is really time to synchronize.
100%. And in order for our body to be healthy, as you say, every cell of it must work for the body as a whole. If we work for ourselves, we become cancer cells. Just tell me honestly, what do you care about in this world? I'm not talking about the people of Allatra. The people of Allatra are the immunity of today's humanity, let's say, of our sick body, who, like immune cells, try to treat. But I mean just all people. Honestly, do we care about the world? Do we care about the lives of other people and the whole of humanity? No. Anyway, our matters, our lives are much more precious, much more important because it's ours, it's me. Isn't that so? Well, this is the behavior of a cancer cell. So we are condemning ourselves. In fact, we are humanity. And we have forgotten that we are humanity. We are the most intelligent, and we are not only spiritualized, we are soul-filled. There is a great power hidden in each one of us, but this power can only be fully awakened when we succeed in becoming a united civilization, a united community. There have been many attempts to create such a life. For example, the Knights Templar. Why take the Knights Templar? Let's recall the best of man of all times, the Prophet Muhammad and his constitution. He laid the foundation for a constitution and rules of life that would give all humanity an opportunity to live in the creative society. But what have we done? We didn't listen to the Prophet. We didn't listen to Jesus Christ. We don't listen to anybody. Why? Because we are selfish. We want to live as we please. We behave like cancer cells in a human body. What do you think? Hand on heart, as they say. What will be the result? That's the answer, my friends. I mean, we get what we deserve. Can we change all that? We can. If we understand that we are part of a single organism and that we must become one united, not a community, but one united civilization, a united society, and then huge opportunities will open up before us. Huge ones. the opportunities that we cannot even imagine now. In this case, the main thing is for each and every one to understand that the time has come not to fight each other, but to fight together for life, for our common life. Otherwise, the Cerberus will simply win. Yes, it will win. Is anyone really opposing it? No one is opposing it. It effortlessly takes our lives, effortlessly destroys not only our homes, but a little time will pass and it will destroy our countries as well. It has already partly started doing it, unfortunately, but this is true. And what can we confront it with? Nothing, absolutely nothing. And this is worth thinking about, friends. Well, until a person experiences this for himself, until he really looks the Cerberus in the eye, he doubts even its presence here. That's how a human is arranged. But only that human who lives like an animal, who lives on the basis of selfishness, such a creature with a clogged soul. Let's say, there is no other way to put it. A very selfish and evil creature, no different from a predator, but we are human beings. We have a soul. The best part of us is angelic, and we shouldn't forget that, right?
And it is very important for those who have lit this inner fire in themselves, the fire of freedom, and who feel as personalities, not to stop shining.
Exactly. And not only to shine, but also to share this fire with each other, right?
Right.
And the inner fire is nothing but God's love. It is our true power. Just imagine, if we put all these lights together, what will happen? Any Cerberus will be frightened. I'll put it this way. So friends, let's just love each other and strive for the best. Right?
Thank you very much, Igor Mikhailovich.
Thank you. Thank you, friends. Peace be with you.